20 minutes of walking every morning rewires your brain, resets your hormones, and shifts your metabolism before most people have even looked at their phone. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share for others to benefit. Most people treat morning walks the way they treat drinking more water. They know it's probably good for them, they intend to do it eventually, and they never quite prioritize it above the other demands competing for their attention first thing in the day. That's a significant mistake. Not because walking is secretly an intense training method, but because the morning, specifically the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking, is a biological window unlike any other point in the day. What happens to your body during that window sets the neurological, hormonal, and metabolic tone for every hour that follows. And a 20-minute walk, taken consistently during that window, initiates a sequence of physiological events that most people spend money, effort, and considerable frustration trying to produce through far more complicated means. This is not about step counts. It is not about burning calories before breakfast. It is about understanding what your body is actually doing in the morning and using a simple, accessible habit to work with that biology instead of against it. What morning light does to your brain and body clock. The first and most underappreciated effect of a morning walk begins not in the legs or the cardiovascular system, but in the eyes. The human body runs on a circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour internal clock that governs the timing of hormone release, metabolism, immune function, body temperature, cognitive performance, and sleep. This clock is primarily calibrated by light, specifically by the spectrum of natural light that exists in the morning hours. A quality of light that artificial indoor lighting cannot replicate regardless of its brightness. When natural morning light enters the eyes and reaches the retina, it activates a pathway to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a small cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus that functions as the body's master clock. This activation does two things simultaneously. It triggers a pulse of cortisol, not the chronic stress variety, but the acute, appropriate morning cortisol spike that generates genuine alertness, focus, and physical readiness. And it begins a timer, set roughly 14 to 16 hours into the future, that determines when melatonin will be released that night. This means that a 20-minute morning walk taken in natural light is not just a morning habit. It is a sleep intervention. It anchors the circadian rhythm, makes the cortisol spike happen at the right time rather than dragging through the morning, and ensures the melatonin signal arrives at the appropriate hour in the evening. People who do this consistently report falling asleep more easily, sleeping more deeply, and waking more naturally, not because they changed anything about their nighttime routine, but because they fixed the morning input that governs the entire 24-hour cycle. The cortisol curve and why timing matters. There is a concept in chronobiology called the cortisol awakening response. In the 30 to 45 minutes after waking, cortisol levels naturally rise to their highest point of the day. This is a healthy and necessary process. It mobilizes energy, activates the immune system, sharpens cognitive focus, and prepares the body for the demands of the day ahead. The problem is that most modern morning routines suppress this response rather than support it. Lying in bed scrolling through a phone in dim indoor light, consuming stimulating content before the nervous system has fully transitioned out of sleep, eating immediately upon waking without any physical movement. These behaviors blunt the cortisol awakening response and leave it incomplete. The result is the prolonged morning grogginess that so many people experience and incorrectly attribute to not being a morning person or needing more coffee to function. Walking outside within 30 minutes of waking engages the cortisol awakening response fully and appropriately. The combination of physical movement, natural light, and the mild thermal shift of outdoor temperature, even slight changes from indoor climate, activates the sympathetic nervous system in a way that completes the transition from sleep to full wakefulness more rapidly and more cleanly than any stimulant. People who establish consistent morning walks almost universally report that within 1 to 2 weeks they begin waking more naturally, often slightly before their alarm, and transitioning into alertness more quickly than they previously thought possible. That experience is not motivational. It is neurological. The cortisol awakening response, when properly supported, produces exactly that outcome. What it does to fat metabolism. Here is where the conversation shifts from neuroscience to metabolic physiology, and where the morning walk becomes particularly interesting from a body composition standpoint. In the hours following sleep, the body is in a state of relative glycogen depletion. The liver has been supplying glucose to the brain and organs through the night, and unless someone ate a large meal immediately before bed, stored carbohydrate levels in the morning are lower than at any other point in the day. This creates a specific metabolic condition. With glycogen availability reduced, the body's ratio of fat oxidation to carbohydrate oxidation during low to moderate intensity exercise is significantly higher than it would be later in the day when glycogen has been replenished by meals. A 20-minute walk at a comfortable conversational pace in the morning, particularly before the first meal, draws on fat stores as a primary fuel source at a proportion that simply isn't available during the same activity performed in the afternoon or evening. This is not a dramatic calorie-burning event. The total energy expenditure of a 20-minute walk is modest, but the substrate from which that energy is drawn and the enzyme activity and mitochondrial adaptations that consistent morning fasted movement develops over weeks shifts the body's metabolic preference toward fat utilization in a way that compounds over time. Beyond the immediate fat oxidation effect, morning movement also improves insulin sensitivity for the hours that follow. Meals consumed after morning exercise are processed more efficiently, with less pronounced glucose spikes and more favorable partitioning of nutrients toward muscle tissue rather than fat storage. The morning walk, in this sense, improves the metabolic quality of every meal eaten afterward. Conclusion: 20 minutes. Outside. In the morning. Before the noise of the day takes over. That is the entire intervention. No equipment, no gym membership, no optimized program or structured protocol. Just a consistent daily commitment to being outside and moving during the window when your biology is most receptive to that stimulus. What it produces across weeks and months of practice is a calibrated circadian rhythm, a properly completed cortisol awakening response, improved fat metabolism, better insulin sensitivity, enhanced prefrontal cortex function, lower baseline anxiety, and deeper, more restorative sleep at night. No single one of those outcomes is dramatic in isolation. Together, compounding daily, they represent a fundamental shift in the biological environment in which every other health decision you make is operating. The people who seem to manage their health, their energy, and their body composition with less apparent effort than everyone around them, they are almost never doing something more complex. They are doing fewer things, more consistently, at the right time. A morning walk is one of those things. It costs nothing. It requires nothing except the decision to step outside. Make that decision tomorrow morning. Make it again the day after. And pay attention, not to the scale or the mirror, but to how differently the day unfolds when it begins this way.